Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron. Thank you for taking some of your valuable time to join me today. I'm joined by my assistant in Toronto, Sinead Willahan. And today my special guest is Lynn K. Russell. And I'm very excited because we're going to talk about near-death experiences. And people may know or may not know that I actually started my career into paranormal and weird things, studying events surrounding death. This is about the same time, or maybe even before, I had my UFO experience in 1975. I'd done a paper for a complete term at the University of Manitoba on weird events that happen around people who die. So what I did is I went to all the various hospitals in the city, talked to all the chaplains who are there when people die, and I basically asked them various questions about near-death experiences. And the first book had just come out at that time. Before then, there was really no reported near-death experiences. They were very rare. I asked questions like, does anybody ever have someone come to greet them? Dead people that come and appear in the room. Does anybody ever predict their death? Are there any miracles? Do people get up and walk out at the last minute? And so I've known about near-death experiences and have done study from the very beginning. There's a lot of major people who have written on it. Raymond Moody was the most famous, writing the 1975 book, which I actually used in the paper that I did on my hospital visits. He wrote the first book, Life After Life, and became almost the most prominent researcher there was. Pin van Lommel had his first encounter with a near-death experience, and this was after CPR came in 1967. People started to be brought back, and he ran into his first case in 1969. Really didn't do anything until the 1980s, and then ran across a study that had been done, and a person that had an experience, and started a study in Europe on people who had a cardiac arrest, and started looking at the near-death experience that a number of the patients that he reviewed had. Kenneth Ring was another big near-death experience researcher. Kenneth Ring, to me, is very prominent because he did a paper on blind people who report that they are able to see during a near-death experience, which is critically important because some of the people that he used were actually blind from birth and actually could see things, which would indicate that there is a second area for sight. It's not just the eyes. There's a second area that is able to see, and that is very important when you look at out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences. So Ring did a study on people, a number of people who were blind, who reported being able to see in a near-death experience. Dr. Penny Satori had done a study. She was working with in a emergency or in a high-risk area of the hospital, had seen a number of people die, and basically went out and did her own study of things that she saw in her study in Great Britain. Jeffrey Long, this is a book that basically was a New York Times. It was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And it was a major study where they had 130, 140 questions, and basically tried to break down the near-death experience into different categories. How many people reported going through the tunnel? How many people reported seeing dead people? And on and on and on, and broke down and looked for patterns inside the near-death experience literature. The importance of today's guest, Lynn Russell, is that Lynn was one of Long's researchers. She spent a lot of time breaking down the numbers, breaking down, reading all the cases, putting them into the various categories, and coming up with the statistics on the near-death experiences. So I'm very happy to have her on today and to talk to her about the research that she's done. I believe she looked at 2,500 near-death experience cases and actually lives in Lethbridge, Alberta in Canada. So she's a fellow Canadian. And a lot of people will at this point come up with all sorts of explanations. It really doesn't matter what Lynn produces or any of the other researchers produce. There now, I believe, someone said there's as many as 30 different counter explanations to explain near-death experiences. It's like the skeptics and debunkers are falling over each other trying to come up with some reason. And so it's really not going to matter. We'll do the interview today and someone will come out and say it was swamp gas or it's a bug grant. Just don't worry about it. It's just they're seeing bugs. I mean, don't worry about it. People really don't want to look at the actual research and the numbers. People want to use left brain interpreter, come up with an instinctive explanation that returns near-death experience to the world of we're biological robots in a random, meaningless universe. In the end, this will all be verified. This will all turn out to be exactly the way it is. There is something beyond death that these people are experiencing. And so I am very happy to welcome Lynn Russell to talk about the research that she did.
Lynn Russell, I'm really excited to be able to talk to you. You're one of the people that has done some of the research that I have, and I want to thank you for doing the research you did for Jeffrey Long's book. You would have affected a lot of people with that research and helping them out to get that best-selling book out. And thank you for doing the research for me. We'll talk a little bit about the research you did for me. I'm greatly appreciative of that, and thank you for taking the time to talk to Desta and I today. And we'll try to keep it short, but I have some questions that I think you need to answer because you probably have as much information as a lot of people, and this is a very interesting subject that I think people should know about. So how are you doing tonight?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
Beautiful.
Nice to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, I'm excited. I guess we always start out with a question of asking how you got into this whole field, because you probably didn't, as a 5-year-old girl, decide you wanted to do near-death experiences. So how did that turn about?
Well, almost. I was 8 or 9, somewhere in there, and my grandfather died. And so that made me realize that I was mortal. I was going to die. And so I went to my mother and asked her, what happens after you die? Well, she was an atheist. So she said, nothing happens. You just disappear.
Wow.
And that was not what I wanted to hear at 8 or 9. So I started, well, not then, but shortly after that, I started studying all kinds of religions. And throughout my whole life, I've studied just about every and their history and how they got to be where they were and what they thought of death and so on. And that just branched into spirituality. And so I was going to be a writer when I retired. That was the plan. And I had a book all in my mind figured out.
Wow.
But the woman in the book was going to be astral projecting. So I wanted to make sure that I could have her actually doing the things that I was asking her to do. And so that's when I got in touch with the NDERF, the Jeffrey Long's, Dr. Long's programmer or site on TV on the computer. And so that was how I got into it, because I was on the chat line there and he asked for someone to volunteer and I put my hand up.
Beautiful. And so for people that may not be familiar, can you explain who Jeffrey Long is, and can you explain what the foundation is, or the research foundation is?
Yes. He is the owner, he and his wife, Jody, are owners of the NDERF, which stands for Near Death Experience Research Foundation. And they have, Dr. Long is a medical doctor, he's an oncologist, and he has been, I guess he was very interested in near death because he was seeing it with his patients and wondering how it could be. And so that's how he got started. And so he opened up this, or he and his wife started up this site. Have gone from there.
Oh, we've lost this audio.
Oh,
Oh, hang on. No, it might just me. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I did hear a bang.
Yeah, that was me. I had
Okay.
lost the audio, but you're doing good. So go ahead.
Okay, all right. Well, that's the story. Dr. Long was very curious, and he knows about all of the doctors that don't agree with NDEs or death experiences, and so he said, "Well, I want to do a real good study about it and find out whether it really is true or not." And so he had a huge, and I mean enormous, questionnaire that people who would write in their experiences. And then I had the wonderful job, and I do mean wonderful, of tearing it apart and looking at how many people had done this or how many people had gone there, or, different places. And how many people had went through the tunnel, for example, and how many people um, went to a garden, or how many people um, saw a light, those kind of questions. And so those were the things that I compiled for him. And then that was for his book, Evidence of the Afterlife, The Science of Near-Death Experiences. That was his
Beautiful.
first book.
Now, did you do these in percentages, or did you just numbers, or what kind of is that? I'm going to go have the questionnaire here. I'm going to ask you a little bit about some of the questions in the questionnaire, but did you have percentages? Because as you probably know, my background is ufology, and at the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and ET Contact, also used the same questions. So I know what the UFO people answered to the questions, but did you do it in percentages or just in numbers?
Numbers. And it would be how many, there was a program that it would be fed into, and the program would calculate the ones, how many did this and how many did that.
Okay. Now, for people who are looking for some expertise, if you were to say you've looked at, I think, what, 2,500 cases you looked at?
Yes.
Okay,
Now,
so if you were, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to just say that I did between 1,500 to 2,000 for Dr. Long. And then I was so intrigued with what I was learning, I just didn't want to stop. And so I just kept going on my own after the research was finished.
Wow. Well, good for you. I mean, that's a resourceful retirement that you spent. In terms of the what happened, can you basically, and you don't know for sure, but can you sort of guess if you were to tell somebody, because one of my assistants, or one of her relatives just died. And so if you were going to talk to somebody and said, okay, what happened to my relative? What do you think is going on? What would you say, based upon your best guess, happens when somebody dies?
Well, the first thing I would tell the relative is that their loved one is in a very beautiful place, and there's tons of love and caring, and the first thing that happens when the person leaves the body is that they feel this warmth and caring and comfort, and knowing that everything is all right. There's okay. You don't need to worry. That's pretty much the first experience, or the first feeling that people have. Not every single person, but 99%. And then they have different experiences getting to their particular location, because no two people have the same death experiences. They're all completely different. There are elements that are the same throughout, but there are the basic things that people experience are quite different from one another. And so they may go through a tunnel, they may go to outer space and look at the stars and be a part of that. They may find themselves in a black space that's called the void, and it's just nothing but blackness. But it's not a threatening thing. I mean, some people might think, "Oh, that's awful," but it's not. It's very caring, and it's comfortable. That's what I would call it. Like, it's peaceful. It's okay to be there most of the time. Some people get a little nervous, But anybody who starts to wonder what's this all about, what's happening, and get a little nervous, immediately they will see a light coming toward them, or them going towards the light, one or the other, and because you can't really tell, and then they get to the location where they are going to go for their experience, which, as I say, is quite different from each other.
And what is the ultimate end result of? Does reincarnation play a part of it? Because I know in the free study it shows 26% were talked to about reincarnation. Did you find that as a major theme?
I think so. I think that since then, I mean, I've never stopped reading or studying about death experiences even after the 2500, because when I've written books, I've had to do research and check out things, make sure I'm saying it right. And that is one thing that seems to be pretty relevant, is that there is a continuation of
Okay.
a reincarnation. And that stands out particularly with people who have not completed the goal that they came here to do, or it also stands out for people who have committed suicide and they're not finishing, like they didn't finish the life, so they have to come back and do it again.
Yeah, you talked a little bit in your book about suicides. Go through I think you had 3 alternatives that they have if they commit suicide.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the first one is if the body that's left behind is still in working shape, it can sustain life, then they are returned most often. There might be exceptions for that, but I'm not very aware of that. Then the second thing that happens is that a person who can't go back is given 2 choices. Now, I have to confess that this first choice is not a common one. So there wouldn't be a lot of people that would have this one. And that is to stay on the other side at the spirit level and relive and relive and relive the situations that brought them up to the choice of suicide. And then, so they still have to face the issue, is what I'm saying. And the other one is to reincarnate into a new body with exactly the same situations and exactly the same issues and work it out without suicide. Because one message that is common throughout all of it is that suicide is not a choice that they have to make. It's not their choice.
And yet, I think you found in the result that judgment is really not really a part of it, like the Christian idea that you get separated and sent to hell.
No, as a matter of fact, throughout all of what I've just told about, they're surrounded by love. There's just nothing left but love, understanding. They understand why. They understand how difficult it is to be here. You know, these spirits that are over on the other side guiding us and being with us, they know how difficult it is to be separated from the source. And that's our source. That's our being. That's our reality. And so here we are in this separate place, completely separated, and that's hard. So they know that. There's just nothing but love and understanding.
And you talked about going to source. Is there an end result? Because this always sort of puzzled me, that if you suddenly work your reincarnations over and over again, and then you sort of go to source and you sort of stop doing stuff, is that the concept that you like go to the unconditional love and drink Mai Tais, or what is the end result of all this? Because to me, I always wondered about that in terms of, like, if you I don't know if you're familiar with the Dr. Michael Newton research, where they talk about the soul groups and stuff, that you have these soul groups that, you know, you'd hear that some of your soul group guys are still in trouble and does somebody want to volunteer to go back? I would think that you would always go back until everybody was at the end result. Like, I can't see, but you give me your impression of this idea, because everybody talks about this, going back to source, remembering who you are, and this kind of thing.
Yes. Well, there are some beautiful experiences that I can share. One is Mellon Thomas Benedict, and he's one of the few. But if you go to NDR and look up in the search engine, look for people who have entered into the light. And there's a lot of good information there. So what happens, before I finish that, before I answer that, I want to go back to reincarnation, because reincarnation is not a punishment. It is not even seen as a punishment. It's just learning and growing and giving back to the source. So we need to understand that it's not a punishment. Okay, so I don't know, what was I talking about?
We were talking about going to source and.
Yeah, the light.
Yes.
Well, yes, not everybody sees the light right away, but it's a common thing for people to see. And even if there isn't a light, it's very bright where they are. And there's no source of the light brightness, they can't see a sun or whatever. Anyway, the point is that they can come to the point where they recognize that they are not a person, that they are not body. And they often take a body with them because that's what we relate to. But once they realize that they're not a body, then they start to see themselves as spirit. And when they see themselves as spirit, then they often, not always, but often enter into the light. And while they're in the light, they realize that this is home. This is where they came from the light. And this is where they're going back. And the light is not just a bright light, not just a lot of energy, but it's a being. It's an intelligence. And it's very intelligent, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And it talks to them and it knows them and it shares things with them. And the longer they're in the light, the more they blend right into it and become the light. And while they do that, they are also taking part in creation. And so they become the light and do all the things that the light does.
Would it be fair to say that most people don't want to come back?
Oh, yes, I would say most. You do get the odd one who said, yeah, okay, I know I have to go back for whatever reason, but most of them don't want to, and some will absolutely plead and some get quite angry and get into a temper tantrum and screaming and hollering, no, I'm not going back.
Wow. I'm do a lot of research into the manifestation of the experience, because you mentioned the fact that everybody has a different one based upon what your religious background is or whatever. So when it comes to these experiences of having, hellfire and damnation thing where they have these very bad things, what's your understanding of what's actually happening there?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a few points on that. The first thing is that when a person has a hell experience, and when they're in this horrible place, they're getting tortured or whatever, and screaming and pleading, they'll plead to get out of it. They'll say, take me out of this. Instantly, when they ask to be removed, they are removed, just like that. So then they'll be taken back to where the warm fuzzy place is,
Yeah.
and they'll ask, what was that all about? And the guides or the sources or whatever they're talking to will tell them that that was something of their own creation, that they created that because they thought that that was what it was supposed to be. And so that's what I understand with that.
Okay. You mentioned the light, which is something that sort of puzzles me, because people who are on board a UFO always describe the light. They say the light is like a 500-watt light bulbs all over the place, but there's nothing. They can't tell where the light is coming from. Do you get that same sort of description there, where there really isn't, like, there's not a sun, there's just light and nobody really knows where it's coming from?
I do, but they're in the minority.
Okay.
Most people see this huge, enormous ball of light, and the one thing they do say over and over is, and it didn't hurt my eyes.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't have any eyes.
That brings us to the research that you did for me. As you may know, I'm working. There's some research that started in China in the 1980s. The CIA was actually down there investigating these little children who could see through blindfolds. And now it's being done in Utah, it's being done in India, in Canada, and Great Britain, where people are training children to see with blindfolds on.
I've heard
And
about
when the
that.
kids they learn to do it because their left brain hasn't really come online yet.
Yeah,
They really don't have any, fear about doing it or fighting back or questioning and
sure,
stuff.
sure.
And the other thing that they say, and that's why I asked you about the hearing and the sight, was two of these kids that I saw on the video said that they could hear things a mile away. And that when they go into, when they have this situation, they seem to describe what happens in out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, that if they wear glasses, when they put the blindfold on, when they see, they don't need glasses anymore. Their sight becomes 20/20, which I think,
Wow.
and that's what I was sort of interested in you is, so my question to you would be, um, the skeptics will say that no, the person's brain is still alive. There's still a piece in the brain that's working, whatever. But no, the eyes are closed. The brain is flatlined. The eyes are closed. So there's no way that the person is seeing, and yet they are seeing. And that's the question I sort of got you to research, was this idea that there's a secondary sight, hearing, and smell. I think you mentioned the one with the roses. The person had no ability to smell, and they could smell roses when they were on the other side.
Yes,
And
yes.
it seems to indicate that this is almost like the primary sight, hearing, and stuff. Would that be fair to say that?
No, because we're talking about the exploration of the children with the blindfold is here at the earth level,
Yeah.
and that is that's the body, okay? That's the physical part. But the people who leave and die don't take a body with them. They become spirit. Now, they will take an ethereal body because they think that that's what they're, and as I said, everybody creates their own experience. So if they think that they're supposed to have a body, they'll have one. But they don't have a body. They're a spirit. They're just a light. They're a spark of light. And and they go into the light and they become the light. And that's the reality. But once they're outside of their body, then they can hear, they can see, they can walk, they can dance. So it's not related because one's without a body.
Okay,
The
but
other one.
what I'm saying is that with the children with the blindfolds, they can't
Yeah.
see either. They're not using their eyes to see.
Yeah.
It appears to me they're using the etheric body, because if you've
Yes.
seen some of the research, they've worked with blind people, and blind people can actually see by
Oh,
using the
really?
technique. And so
Yes, and that
that's the whole
technique.
idea is,
Yes.
the ultimate question that you and I are looking at when you start looking at this experience is, what is actually seeing? So you're talking about the etheric body. So to me, it's almost like the kids, they've been taught to see with their etheric eyes, hear with their etheric ears,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
sort of thing. They've sort of
Yeah.
duplicated this thing. And it's sort of, because that's the argument I think you're always up against is,
Yeah.
no, the brain is still alive. No, you're just,
Yeah.
they're just making this stuff up. They remembered it after. And we know that consciousness has moved away, and that you can move around. True, you can move from place
Okay.
to place. Wherever you think you want to go is where you go when you're
Okay.
outside your body.
Yes, 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 that's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
and
All
it's
they have
all,
to do is think about it and they're there.
yeah, because that's the thing that I think is very interesting in terms of understanding the near-death experience, is the fact that it basically proves that sight is not exclusively through the eyes, because when you're
Yeah.
dead on the operating table, your eyes are closed,
Yeah.
your brain is flatlined.
Yeah.
There's no way your eyes are seeing anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now the other question I wanted, because we do in terms of the survey that was done with the free, there was a lot of things that you can maybe tune me in on. One was 40% of the people who did the free survey said at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. Is that common there?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Any question is answered, not only just answered, but all the ramifications to that question are also answered. So the answer they get is so complete, there's no questions left.
Wow. And
I know. When I first heard that, I got so excited because I love learning. And I thought, wow, I can know everything.
Yeah, that's what I know I say in the UFO field, people don't want to talk to the experiences. They just say, oh, it's just anecdotal stories. And I said, but if the person said they knew everything in the universe, don't you think you'd want to talk to them? Maybe you
Yeah,
could learn something, but
yeah,
people don't.
yeah,
They sort of ignore it. The other
yeah.
one that they had was we got the downloads. 42% of all experiencers from the UFO survey said that they have mathematical, scientific, or technical material in their head they did not learn in school. Do you get the
Aha.
download thing, the download stories where people are getting inventions and stuff like that?
Yes, that does happen. They act. As a matter of fact, Melatonin Benedict has quite a number of. He has a list of inventions that he made after he came back. His experience is really quite astonishing. Um, but anyway, yes, they do. They have talents that they like. For example, one fellow left and he strummed the guitar. That's about it. And when he came back, he was writing symphonies, and he never had any training. Um, one girl was a teenager, or high school or college, one or the other, and she was math was her worst subject. She did not want to have anything to do with that. And when she came back, she was a math whiz. So yes, there are talents that they somehow get that they didn't have before. Another thing is that they become very psychic when they come
Yes.
back, and
Yeah,
that's
that
very common.
yeah,
Almost
that's
everybody.
common with the UFO experiences as well. And
Is that?
in terms of seeing things like seeing ghosts, orbs, the stuff starts to happen around them.
Knowing
Is that true?
things ahead of time, and yeah.
And watches, is that true that a lot of near-death experience people can't wear watches?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Not all of them, but
Yeah.
yes, that's a problem. Yeah, technology. Yeah.
Because in the UFO field, they always say that if you've been on board a ship, you have this problem. And I'm saying, no, it may be that they're having a near-death experience or having an out-of-body experience rather than being
Right.
taken on board a ship. Because the other thing that we have that you can confirm is probably going on there is electronics. Every electronics they touch gets sort of messed
Yes.
up.
Yes. Yes.
They drain batteries, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know about the drain batteries. I don't think I've heard that one, but that doesn't mean that didn't happen. I just don't remember it.
Yeah, there was Laura Ketchlich, if you've ever talked to her. She talked about that. She had the haunted farm, and she had two
Oh,
near-death experiences, but she had the batteries. But the paranormal stuff happens,
yes,
and
yes.
scenes from the world's future. So do they see these sort of end of the world scenarios, or just
No,
things of
no. And one of the things that does happen, especially with all that knowledge that you were talking about,
yeah,
is that they come back and they forget it. They don't come back with the knowledge. They'll come back with some of it,
yeah,
but they don't remember all of it. Well, most of them don't.
yeah,
Benedict did, and there was one or two, as I've said, an NDERF that you can check out, the ones that went to the light or that went to the beginning. Look at that. Look up the people that have gone to the beginning,
yeah.
and they will um, they will be able to tell you all the knowledge. They remember, but very few people do.
In terms of the knowledge, I've talked to people like the UFO experiencers who make these claim I knew everything, and I always say, okay, stop. How do you know there wasn't something number 7, 8, 9 on the far side of the universe they forgot to tell you about? And then they will say, I'm not sure. I just know. Is there that knowing, this absolute sense that they know that this is real, that
Yeah,
this is not an idea?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Very, very, very much so. This is very, very real for them. As a matter of fact, it's more real than our life here. And one of the things that they'll say, and there's one fellow called Larry, and Larry repeatedly kept saying, but this isn't real. He would watch a movie and he'd say, this isn't real. He would read a magazine and say, but this isn't real. It was really upsetting him that nothing he was seeing was real.
Wow. That's fascinating. And they have like the sense of the fact that it's more real than the real world, and it comes with all this happiness, unconditional love. Is the unconditional love pretty common in terms of what you get?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. As I said, even the people who have messed up are surrounded, even during their during their life review, they'll review everything they've done. And even when they do bad things, they're still being surrounded by this love. It's just because you know what? Because the source is love. And the source can't be anything else but love.
So would you say love is the basis of the universe?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I've learned is that um, people who've been into the light and looked at creation happening will say that it was like a flower that just never stopped blooming. It just kept going and going and going. And that's really cool. But what they found was that it was the love that was the power that was driving the system. So that to me is cool. That means we're love power.
Yeah. And all telepathic on the other side?
Pardon?
All telepathic on the other side?
Oh, yes, automatically. Yes, automatically. Yeah.
The free survey, the UFO survey, shows that 54% of the experiencers claim that they were talked to about oneness and love. Can you talk about the oneness component to this whole thing, the idea of oneness?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that is almost universal. Um, Almost every single person that has a death experience feels that oneness and feels connected to everything, whether they find themselves out in the middle of the universe and with the stars, or whether they, it doesn't matter what they are looking at or what they're experiencing, they become one with it. Which goes back to the creation part when I said that they enter the light and they become creators.
How does that oneness, like you'll get that in psychedelics as well. I suddenly realized I was one with everything and everything's alive. How does that affect people? Like when they come back, do they change their lives to become vegetarians?
Oh,
Do they do this kind of stuff where their life sort of gets
yes,
shifted around?
absolutely. Yes, they sure do. They yeah. As a matter of fact, coming back can be difficult for them because um, they they feel like um, they don't belong anymore. That this isn't real. That it doesn't fit. Some people just shove it off and shrug it off and say, "Oh well, I know I'll be home with the light um, sometime, so I'll just stay here and do my thing." Other people will get quite angry and very angry for having come back. And I gave a talk once, and a lady came up to me after the talk and just broke my heart because she said to me, "I don't want to be here. I'm just biding time. I'm just marking time. I do not want to be here." And I thought, what a shame. What a shame. The only time there's any negativity on the other side is when people are not trying to do what they've come here to do. They all have a chore or a task or whatever, and if they're not trying, so then they'll get asked a question that says, "What have you done with your life?" And that question immediately brings about feelings of shame and guilt that they haven't done anything, that they've just goofed off and being very selfish.
In terms of what they see on the other side, is there any, because you'll hear a lot of religions talking about sort of evil spirits, evil things. Do you run into that kind of stuff where people will encounter some sort of evil force on the other side?
Well, they do, but as I've said, that anything evil is made up. It's made up by us. We're the ones who create that because we think that's what it should be. As I said, we take an active role in creating our death experience, and if we think that it's supposed to be evil, then it'll be evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There is one other thing you mentioned about, and I've lost it again. All right, well, maybe it'll come
I'm losing it too. I mean, we're getting to that age, I guess.
back.
Is it true? I hear these stats like 75% of people get divorced, or there are people that still commit suicide when they come back. Is that kind of,
I'm
are
not
those
sure about
rumors?
the suicide. I have heard that I've heard both, and I haven't read both, but I have heard both that people who are come back sometimes commit suicide. I personally have not ever read that, so I can't say.
Yeah, it may just be
Um,
a rumor.
yeah, yeah. And what was the other part of the question? about?
Now I forgot. No, I forgot. Well,
Sorry.
the divorce and
Oh, yes, divorces, yeah. What happens with the divorce rate is it's a real problem because when they come back, they don't care about the material life or the material things. They could
yeah.
care less about anything material. And that can cause problems if your spouse is very much into materialism. So, because they would just want to live easy, happy, you know. And so it's okay if that's how your spouse is, but if if that isn't where it's, then they go separate ways. Yeah.
In the free survey, the UFO survey that used Jeffrey Long's questions, they had one of the stats was that 50% of all people claimed they could either heal someone or that they had been healed themselves.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, yes. They come back with, that's part of the psychic thing. They come back with the ability to heal, or, and those some people come back, they're not healed immediately, but they're healed so quickly from what normally would happen that it's astonishing. You know, it just blows everybody away within days. Like Anita Mojani, for one. I mean, she's famous, but you know, there are others that have had stage 4 cancers that have come back and completely healed within days.
Wow. And I guess even Alexander would be the same sort of thing where
Yes,
he
yes,
should never have survived.
yes, yes.
Soul contract. Do you believe, like, in terms of the fact that people choose to have near-death experiences? Because one of the things that happened in the UFO survey was they wanted to do a committee, and they said, "Well, it's bizarre that you have all these people that claim that they've interacted with this non-human intelligence, been on board ships and stuff, and 37% of them have had near-death experiences." And we need to find out how can these two random events sort of fit together. And I said, well, maybe they're not random events. Maybe. So what do you think? Do you think that people choose to have near-death experiences, or is this
No,
some random thing? Are they
no.
coming to do some issue of part of us? I guess it would be a soul contract.
Yeah. No, I think that they legitimately died. I really resent the word near in the near death experience because it disqualifies the experience and makes it into something that's sort of kind of almost, and it's not. These people have died, their heart stopped, everything is breaking down, you know, and some people have been dead for hours and hours and hours. I have in my book about people who have been in rigor mortis, in full rigor mortis when they come back and in the morgue. And that takes up to 13, 14 hours for that to happen. So they've been dead for that long. So that can't be, um, you know, the brain breaking down or drugs or whatever else excuse that other people give.
Yeah. But we do have experiences, though, in terms of people who, and the example I can think of is the spiritual advisor to Hillary Clinton was Jean Houston in New York. And she describes the fact that she jumped out of a plane when she was 17 years old, her parachute didn't open, and she was suddenly in the middle of a life review.
Ah,
And
yes, that does happen.
so you have an expression for it, near, what do you call it? You have
That's called a fear death.
a fear death. Okay.
Fear death, yes. Yes, people do have fear death experiences, and they are, I think they're miracles because they can be heading. One boy was heading for a bus, and all of a sudden, he wasn't there anymore. He was at the next stoplight down the street. So, things like that. I mean, you know, there's a few of those. Just look up, any of your audience wants to find out more about them, just look up fear death experiences.
Couple last questions. Do you have a lot of people coming to you after you put your stuff out in terms of, and what are you able to do for people? You must be sort of overwhelmed with people.
Actually, I'm not. No, I'm not. I have fans, but no, I'm not overwhelmed at all. I do have some people who latch on and don't let go, but I'm very gentle. And I used to be a counselor for about 30 years before I was before I retired. And so I sort of know how to be nice and let go.
Are you still doing research?
Oh, always, always, always. And if I hear, for example, I don't. The one religion I have never found anything about is Sikhism. I don't know them. I don't know what they do. I don't know anything about them, and I would love to know. So I'm still learning.
Well, I know a few Sikhs. I'll introduce you to some.
Okay, great.
They used to work for me at the university. Yeah, it's an exciting life, I think, that you've had, that you've been able to do it. And have you got anything planned in terms of another book or?
Oh yes, it's almost finished. The next one. It's at this point it's called Your Quantum Consciousness,
Wow,
and I look at the spirituality and science and blend the two together. And I
wow.
use quantum physics, and I use because I love that kind of stuff.
De-
So,
yeah, Desta and I are putting out a book, in fact, in the next 24 hours on
oh,
contact modalities, which is the same sort of idea. So give us your, say, 2-minute version of how this fits into consciousness and
okay.
quantum
Well,
physics.
yeah. Oh, yes. And consciousness is where it's at. I mean, that's the bottom line, really.
Yeah,
So anyway, talking about, well, quantum physics has shown us that particles behave in very unusual and strange ways. They shouldn't be doing that, but they do. And so quantum physics, there was no answers. Nobody could come to any understanding of why this was happening. And actually, the second half of my book covers all of this, or a lot of it anyway. And so they found out that our consciousness is somehow connected. And I know that scientists would absolutely roll in their graves if they heard me say that out
yeah,
loud.
yeah.
But I have research that shows that that is exactly what happens.
Do you believe we've made progress? I don't know how many years you've been working on this, but do you see progress from the time you started to the
Oh
understanding in
yes.
the public today?
Oh yeah. Well, because no, I'm 82. So
Yeah.
I started studying when I was in my mid-teens, and so that's like 60 odd years ago. So 66, I think it is, or something like that. Anyway, so um, so back then, first of all, there was no spirituality at all. It
Okay.
it was only religions and the Eastern guys, those
Yeah.
weirdos. Um, and so there really wasn't the broad perspective that we have. People have branched out since the boomers and 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 the Beatles, and just opening up to meditation and new ways of seeing things, and that's been beautiful. So yes, everything is quite better actually.
Wow. I've one of my main questions I forgot, so I'll ask you this main question, and then I'll sort of give you your last question. But back in the 1970s, this is when the first book came out by Moody in '75. I was
Oh yes.
actually did a study at the University of Manitoba for one of my courses where I went to the hospitals, and I was at that time was very interested in just weird things. I wanted to know because near-death experiences has just been sort of made public, and I wanted to know, okay, did anybody? And I went to chaplains. I didn't go to doctors and nurses. I went to the chaplains, who a lot of times are there when the people die and they know what's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wanted to know if you had these other experiences. What I was checking on is, number one, are there any miracles? Does anybody predict their death? Does anybody come and greet people? I think you've got a lot of stories like that where they come to
Oh,
greet people
oh
before they go
yes,
across.
yes, yes. Um, yes, as a matter of fact, that's very common actually, that they will have someone of their loved ones come and greet them at the time of their death. Yes, that's very common.
And who
Um,
usually comes? Is there a certain type of soul? Is it
well,
like a usually a
it's usually the loved ones that they've left behind, and or that they have gone ahead, and they wanted to see them, and so they might see their wife or their husband. They might see their mom or dad, or siblings, or a close friend, that kind of thing, and maybe grandma or grandpa. a loved one that they feel close to, usually.
And when you're on the other side, is it true that when you run up against people that you really didn't like? I mean, it's sort of all bygones be bygones. It sort
Yeah,
of
it
changes.
sure is. Do you know, every ill feeling that we have here is gone. Just completely 100% gone. It doesn't exist.
Wow. Wow, fantastic. So let me sort of close it down by asking you how people can contact you, and I need you to sort of give us sort of based upon all the years that you say, if it was your last day on Earth, what are you going to tell people that need to remember based upon the things that you found to be important in your research that you want to pass on to people?
Sure. Okay, well, the first thing is what I found myself learning, and I was so excited about, was that we are so beautiful. We just don't even know it. And Anita Morjanik talks about that as well in her book. If we just understood how magnificent we are, we would conquer the world. Well, we conquer the universe, and we do actually. We really are amazing beings, and we need to stop seeing ourselves as so limited, and that life happens to us, and
Exactly.
know that we can take control, that we have a lot more power and control than we give ourselves credit for. So that would be my first message that I would give to people. The other one is to trust themselves. And I mean, really trust yourself completely. I was assessed as mentally slow when I was a child, and I didn't find out until I was intelligent until I was in my 30s, 31. And what a shame! What a shame! Because and so since then I've challenged myself. What can I find? What can I do? All right. So I went back to school and I wound up being a family counselor. And I started art and I could do that. And
Yeah.
then I wrote books and I could do that. And so I practice, I push myself, I try and find out. And that's what I want people to do. I want people to find joy in the world and in themselves by challenging themselves. What can you do? What are the things that you would have liked to have done, but you just didn't have time or you didn't have the money or whatever? Just play around at it.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful message. I said I was sort of my last question, but I always lie. So it occurred to me when you're talking about this. You said that your parents, I think your mother was an atheist, your father didn't have any interest in religion. What about your children? One of the things that people always complain to me when they come to me as experiencers in the UFO community is my kids don't care. They won't let me see my grandkids. My husband
Oh,
doesn't understand. Is that what about your kids? Do they
well,
buy into this stuff?
my one daughter died,
Oh,
and
sorry to hear.
she was never married or anything. So, and no, she didn't believe anything of this stuff. She just thought I was weird. My son pats me on the head and says, "That's nice, Mom."
Exactly. It's almost like when the experiencers come to me and they complain, I say, I think that's part of the pattern. Get used to it. I've never heard anything different. It's almost like it's there to keep you grounded, not
Yeah,
to get your ego inflated or whatever. It's almost like it's
yeah.
a benefit.
And
You need this.
my youngest daughter is a little bit into this. Like she's interested in knowing what I'm doing and that kind of thing. So she's a little bit interested.
That's why I always say to people, experience, and probably you would have the same thing I would say to you, is that you got to make sure that your research files are put in a library or something, because my son, it goes in the garbage. I guarantee it. Next day, he no interest whatsoever. So that you got to make sure that you protect, because you've done a lot of research and it's very valuable stuff, and to put
Yeah.
it down so that 500 years from now, your great 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 grandchildren will say, "Oh, that was my great grandmother. Man, she knew what was going on. She
Right.
had it all figured out."
Yeah,
And
I'll do that. I'll tell them to archive it.
okay,
Well, my books will be.
yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so your book is coming out. Let me know when your book comes out, and I'll help you promote it. I'll do what I
Okay.
can to
Well,
move.
that one's still getting edited. I'm editing it, and then it's going to a publisher after that. Now I have got publishers that are interested,
Yeah,
but once a publisher picks up a book, it takes about 1.5 years for it to get out, so
Yeah.
it'll be a while.
And hopefully they don't ask you to cut stuff out. I know when I went through a publisher, they said, oh, you got 120,000 words. It's 1995. You need to go to 80,000 words. So you
Yeah,
need to cut
yeah,
1/3 of the book out. And it's like, what?
yeah.
How do people contact you? You're on Facebook?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, and my Twitter name is ArtSoul2. That's one word, ArtSoul2, all one word. And I'm also, within days, I'm going to have my website up. Yeah.
Wow. Oh,
Yes,
fantastic.
yes.
Have you got an address for it?
It will be LynnKRussell.com.
And what are you putting? Have you got articles or stuff that you're going to put up?
I've written some articles, so I'll be putting they are in there. And I put a thought for the day out every day, and it'll go in there.
What's the
And,
thought for today?
oh golly, I'd have to look it up. It was to do with older people, I think, and being beautiful. I don't know, something like that. I remember the picture I put up was of what's that president that's still alive and he builds houses?
Carter, Jimmy Carter.
Yeah. I put his picture with it.
Wow. So we'll link your site. We'll be the first one to get to link your site. I mean, I'll be excited to read what you're doing there.
Yeah, and it'll be up in days. So, and I love hearing questions. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to contact me and ask. I just love questions. I love to talk about this stuff.
Yes, you do, and you do a good job of it. I'm really impressed that you've done as much as you did in terms of stepping up and because you got to realize, I mean, if you hadn't done that research, that book may have never come out, and the world wouldn't be the same place. So I'm honored to have met you and to have been able to talk to you. And
thank you. That's what I wanted. When I heard this beautiful stuff coming back, I just had to share it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing with us, and let's talk again soon. And thanks again for sharing with us all your wisdom and knowledge.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you, Lynn.
Bye-bye.